From happy vagabond to happy congressman, Todd Rokita joins us on the program next here on 93 WIBC.
You're listening to Pete the Planner on 93 WIBC.
You gotta love do-overs. You know, you do something that ideally has consequences, and then someone waves their hand and say, do-over, we're doing it again. And a congressman from Michigan is proposing that your student loans that you took out knowing that you'd have to pay them back, you could possibly have a do-over. Now, that sounds nice and all, but in my opinion, as someone who studies student loans, it would be not only the worst thing that could happen to our economy, but it could be the worst thing that happens to the cost of education. It would cause college costs to skyrocket if there was immediate forgiveness of student loans. So I had to turn to someone to get a perspective from Congress of what's going on. So I turned to Congressman Todd Rokita from the great state of Indiana. Congressman Rokita, welcome to the show. What are your thoughts on this student loan forgiveness plan?
Well, hey, Pete. First of all, it's great to be back, and I think you picked up on an excellent issue here. I happen to sit on the Education and Workforce Committee, so these kinds of things and this bill in particular will come to the Education and Workforce Committee. Not even certain it'll get a hearing, but it's a long way of saying this is the jurisdiction that I've been assigned to and deal with every day. And let me first, Pete, to zoom out and remind everybody that this is just one example. The student loan program, and now this do-over that you're talking about that people want, where we can just forgive what really, as you describe it, is what should be personal responsibility.
Right.
And program after program, federal government program, period, program after program, what we're doing with these programs, whether we intend to or not. And the more and more I'm out in Washington, D.C., the more and more I believe that there's some kind of intent to it. But that aside for a minute, the more and more this keeps happening, the more and more we erode the personal responsibility of individuals and families. And when you do that, you end up with a society, with a culture that can't do anything for itself. And you have to rely on a nanny government to do everything for you and to make every decision for you. So I had to zoom out there for a little bit, Pete, to explain that, you know, the reason for our debts and the reason for the condition of this economy and the reason for the situation we're in is not the student loan program. It's just another in a long line of examples of things that are wrong. And you should, you should have to pay back your loans. You should have to pay them back with interest. That's part of the personal responsibility required to live in a free republic. So we're going to be against this bill. I'm certainly going to be against this bill, and I don't think it'll go anywhere. In particular, there is something to say about the interest rates that are going to creep up here in July by statute.
Absolutely.
The interest rates on student loans are supposed to go up over 6% when the current low interest rate expires, and because that would mean that they may be above fair market value, what a fair market interest rate is, then I think that's ripe for discussion. But other than that, I don't think this bill's going to get a hearing.
Yeah, I'm joined by Congressman Todd Rokita as we talk about this new proposed legislation, the Student Loan Forgiveness Act of 2012, which I call the Belittling of Financial Responsibility Act of 2012. Congressman Rokita, 99% of this bill is absolute hogwash, including what is said to, quote, promote financial responsibility by capping future forgiveness of future students at $45,500. They're basically saying, if you're 16 years old right now, you're going to school in 2 years, preemptively, we're going to go ahead and forgive $45,000 of student loans. I mean, with all due respect, what the hell is that? That doesn't even make sense.
Well, what they're trying to do, again, remember what I said about, more and more, the more and more I'm out in Washington, D.C., the more and more I think that it's not just ignorance, it's actual intent behind some of these ideas and some of these bills and some of these programs. And here I think the intent is to, again, make higher education simply another government program where some get a benefit that the rest of us have to pay for. And more than that, it's just not the rest of us in the here and now. We're making the children of tomorrow pay for our education today. We're making the children of tomorrow pay for our food stamps today and our unemployment checks today. Because the fact of the matter is, Pete, and we've discussed this before, 42% of everything your federal government spends per year is money it borrows from private citizens or from China, and that will have to be paid back with interest, right? No one's going to forgive the United States interest or forgive the United States loans. It'll be paid back. We'll be dead and gone. It'll be paid back by people who don't exist yet. And so I simply ask the people who are for these kind of debt forgiveness and this abdication of personal responsibility, why are you more important than the children of tomorrow? Why are you more important than people who have no voice in the matter yet?
You know, I think back, my father and my mother paid for my college education at the great Hanover College in southern Indiana. My dad refinanced the family house. He took it upon himself. He sacrificed and did that and paid it back later. But Congressman Rokita, what we're saying now is we're taking an equity line against our future. And this whole plan, which I've read, which is a total popularity ploy. It's a total, hey, student loan bubbles forming. You know, Hanson Clark, the congressman that came up with this, I read the New York Times too. I know there's a $1 trillion student loan bubble, but this is just, it reeks of someone that's never looked at anyone's financial situation other than their own and truly understands it. This is the furthest thing from a solution to the student loan problem that could possibly be discussed.
Right. I think that's exactly right. You know, there is a bubble. The student loan debt has now, I think, surpassed credit cards as the largest segment of part of debt, portion of debt in our country, private debt in our country. I happen to believe that the high cost of school, of tuition, and we have a problem there too. I mean, it's very, very expensive to go get an education.
Right.
And I hear that a lot, and I think that's a fair question. But my answer, and it's a working theory at this point, but as I continue to gather evidence, I'm more comfortable in making that theory a law, in the sense that it's correct, and that is tuition and school expenses, especially for higher education, are so high precisely because we have this federal money washing around.
Exactly.
And if we would just get the federal government out of it and make people be responsible for going, you still get a loan, get one from a bank with a fair market interest rate, so on and so forth. There's plenty. We would take so many of the dollar bills that are awash in education right now. We would take them out of the system, and therefore, I bet that the salary you pay some of these professors, most of them liberal, by the way, would go down to their market rate. And I just think they're inflated right now, and it's just not professor salaries. It's not the demagogue them. It's all the costs of higher education. It would go back down to a fair market value. Competition would be reintroduced, where schools will compete against each other for so that they can attract the best students, so they can attract your kids into the best programs. Again, the free market, free enterprise works just as well in education as it does in any other part of our economy.
Yeah, and again, I don't think it's necessarily the professor salaries as much as the climbing walls and the Club Med mentality on college campuses. It's become a sales job to sell a student on there by showing them all the amenities of the college. That's why I do feel like more efficient technological education via the internet can be a good thing if used correctly, and more importantly, Congressman, priced correctly. It doesn't cost as much to educate someone online as it does in person, yet a lot of these institutions, a lot of the for-profit institutions, are charging more to educate students online than versus physically.
Well, that's true, and I am a big proponent of online education when it's done correctly. In fact, I co-sponsored a bill a couple of weeks ago that passed the House that keeps the federal government at bay and their hands otherwise off trying to over-regulate the way online courses are given. And because that online education, and some of these for-profit colleges that operate, are a great example of the efficiency and the excellence that you can achieve, again, when schools are allowed to compete, when programs are allowed to compete, when ways of teaching are allowed to compete to drive costs down. So I think, Pete, you're exactly right.
Well, here's what I know what's going to happen. I'll let you go, but I know when you guys talk about this in Congress, they're going to roll out some people whose lives have been ruined by student loans. My offer to you, Congressman, is roll me out there, a person who's seen thousands of people's financial situations, and not that you need help telling the truth with this whole thing, but I will preach the gospel of personal financial responsibility as an American that sees this every single day. So yeah, there I am. I'm offering you me. How about that, Congressman?
Well, it's hard to refuse such a good offer, but I do need you. Don't ever say you don't need me to help tell the story. This is a very hard message. I mean, what we're trying to explain or sell is broccoli, and the other side is selling Twinkies. And so we're preaching personal responsibility and how rewarding and how free you can be if you can be responsible for yourself and take care of your family and your community through your church, and don't worry about a federal government doing it. So that's a harder message. It takes time to sell. It takes the right kind of people to sell. Let me just say, and I'll stop here, Pete, that your audience is going to be critical to having this conversation, to having this cultural change that we have to have in this country if we are going to keep the republic. Like Benjamin Franklin said over 200 years ago, and Mitch Daniels said in his book recently, keep the republic. It takes the citizenry involved. It takes, the old adage was never talk religion and politics. We better be at least talking politics right now. Get out of our comfort zone. Get this country back. And the student loan issue is just another example, but it's a good one.
Thank you so much for your time, Congressman. I always appreciate it, and I hope to talk to you again soon.
Thanks, Pete. See you out in D.C. then, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so. Coming up after the break, the biggest waste of money of the week here on the Pete the Planner Show, and tell you, maybe Congressman Hanson Clark's per diem the way things are going here on 93 WIBC.